once again, back once again, back once again, back once again, back once again with a beat. Let the bass kick.
Solomon is probably one of the best examples of someone needing to take his own advice. Yes, he was human, but he was wise. Wise in a way that we can be also. God freely provides us the wisdom we need to properly handle life, lead, and impact others. Welcome to the Wisdom in All Things podcast. Today's episode, careful, you just might be laboring in vain. Think of it this way, living like it all depends on you. Stephen Whitmer says, lots of Christians are practical atheists. Faced with a problem, we instinctively turn to ourselves to fix it. As I write this, my family and I have spent the last 6 weeks in a hotel room because the plumbing in our rental house has left it uninhabitable. That's the legal term. A problem we can do nothing about. Calls to the city, property managers, and various tradesmen, all to no avail. It reminded me of a phrase I was first introduced to by a radio consultant we were using at the time. He said, there's lots of running around on the field, but no points are being scored. Which is to say, there's a lot of effort being put toward, going nowhere, basically. Most years, that would be a fair description of my Minnesota Vikings. When initial efforts fail, we become more desperate and begin to anxiously stab at anything that might lead us to the resolution we seek. As this cycle continues, it tends to pick up speed as we become increasingly disillusioned. In case of our plumbing, it laid bare our dependency. Possibly the larger lesson in these instances is to clear up any confusion over who is most capable and ultimately responsible. Psalm 127:1 says, unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. However, laboring in vain is not limited to our trying to fix something that is broken. It also applies to our reaching forward to create and do good. We can just as easily look to ourselves to fix problems as we can to know and do what is right. So let's talk about what it looks like to no longer labor in vain. How can we live in a healthy tension between working and trusting? Again, Stephen Whitmer says, the bitter fruit of laziness, anxiety, and pride have crept into my life whenever I've gotten it wrong. And on the flip side, the beautiful fruit of a restless heart and selfless love has resulted from getting it right. So the first point about what it looks like to no longer labor in vain is this idea that God's hands are on ours. In his article, Unless God Works, We Work in Vain, Stephen lays out 3 scenarios. God does nothing, we do everything. Secondly, God does everything, we do nothing. And finally, third, God does everything and we do something. This last scenario is the basis for the healthy tension between working and trusting. Whitmer reminds us of 1 Corinthians 15:58 that says, we're to be active, even abounding in good works. We're to be actively involved. The question is how? Consider fatherhood as a prime example. When my dad taught me to mow the lawn, his hands were on top of mine, pushing and guiding the mower. It would not have been completed or completed correctly had that not been the case. So God's hands are on ours. Keep that picture in mind. Secondly, consider the work God does. John Piper underlines this in his article, 11 Ways God Works for Us. He says, behind every accomplishment, God is at work for us. His working for me is always before and under and in any work I do for him. More than making a request, there's an intimate collaboration at work. Dependency, provision, trust. John Piper again says, the proper connotation of saying God works for me is that I am bankrupt and I need a bailout. I am weak and need someone strong. I am endangered and need a protector. I am foolish and need someone wise. I am lost and need a rescuer. To ensure that we're not laboring in vain, take notice. Where are God's hands in relation to yours? Have you settled your heart on how God works? Then, are you practicing the proper, and what I call it, a first responder mentality? God should be looked to and allowed to respond first to whatever we are called to do for him. This is the Wisdom in All Things podcast, a journey that is designed to help you integrate wisdom into all areas of your life. Listen to more podcasts, read other articles, those kinds of things. Explore wisdom at wisdominallthings.com and be sure to tell others about the podcast. Thanks.